The morning mist hung heavy over Balmoral Castle as Sergeant James MacLeod began his routine patrol of the ancient Scottish estate. For 15 years he had walked these same corridors, protecting the royal family with unwavering dedication. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floors as he made his way through the castle's labyrinthine passages, each one holding centuries of royal history within its walls. MacLeod had served under 3 different monarchs during his distinguished career, but none had commanded his respect quite like Queen Elizabeth II. The late Queen had always treated the staff with genuine warmth and appreciation, remembering birthdays, asking about family members, and ensuring that those who served the crown felt valued. Her passing had left a profound void not just in the nation, but in the hearts of those who had been privileged to serve her personally. The sergeant paused at the entrance to the Queen's private wing, a section of Balmoral that had been sealed off since her death 6 months earlier. The heavy oak doors bore the royal coat of arms, and beyond them lay the monarch's most personal spaces, her private study, bedroom, and the small sitting room where she had spent countless quiet evenings reading and reflecting. These rooms had been declared off-limits by royal decree, preserved exactly as she had left them, a sacred memorial to her remarkable 70-year reign. King Charles III had made it explicitly clear that these quarters were to remain undisturbed until a formal decision was made about their future. The instruction had been communicated to every member of the household staff, from the most senior courtiers to the newest kitchen assistants. Everyone understood the gravity of respecting this boundary, and MacLeod took his responsibility as guardian of these sacred spaces very seriously indeed. As he checked the locks and security systems, MacLeod reflected on the changes that had swept through the royal household since the Queen's passing. The new king and queen consort had brought their own style and preferences to royal residences, but Balmoral remained a place of deep emotional significance. It was here that the Queen had spent her final days, surrounded by the Scottish Highlands she had loved so dearly throughout her life. The castle seemed quieter than usual that morning. With most of the royal family away on official duties, only a skeleton staff remained to maintain the property, ensuring that every room was perfectly maintained for when the family returned. MacLeod appreciated these peaceful moments, when he could perform his duties without the usual bustle of royal visits and state occasions. However, as he completed his morning rounds, something felt different about the atmosphere in the castle. There was an unusual tension in the air, a sense that change was coming whether welcome or not. The other guards had mentioned seeing increased activity in certain areas of the castle, whispered conversations between senior staff members, and an overall feeling that important decisions were being made behind closed doors. MacLeod shook off these concerns and continued with his patrol, unaware that this particular morning would test his loyalty and professional integrity in ways he had never imagined. The events that were about to unfold would force him to choose between diplomatic silence and his sworn duty to protect the memory and dignity of the late Queen Elizabeth II, as the Scottish sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows through the castle's ancient windows. MacLeod completed his security check of the restricted wing. Everything appeared to be in perfect order, just as it had been every day since the Queen's passing. The rooms remained sealed, the memories preserved, and the royal legacy protected from any unauthorized intrusion. Little did he know that within hours, his world would be turned upside down by an incident that would send shockwaves through the royal household and beyond. The afternoon brought an unexpected flurry of activity to Balmoral Castle when Queen Consort Camilla arrived unannounced with a small entourage of personal staff. Her black Range Rover swept up the gravel driveway, followed by 2 additional vehicles carrying her lady-in-waiting, private secretary, and several other attendants. The sudden arrival caught the castle staff off guard, as no official visit had been scheduled for that day. MacLeod watched from his position near the main entrance as the Queen Consort emerged from her vehicle, her expression determined and purposeful. She wore a navy blue coat and sensible walking shoes, suggesting this was not intended to be a formal occasion. However, there was something in her demeanor that suggested this visit had a specific and important purpose, one that could not wait for proper scheduling and advance notice. The head butler, Mr. Thornton, hurried to greet the royal visitor with his usual professionalism, though MacLeod could detect a hint of surprise in the elderly man's manner. Thornton had been with the royal household for over 30 years and was rarely caught unprepared. But this unexpected arrival had clearly disrupted the castle's normally smooth operations. As Camilla entered the main hall, her personal secretary could be heard making urgent phone calls, apparently trying to coordinate with Buckingham Palace and Clarence House about the impromptu visit. The lady-in-waiting carried several folders, and what appeared to be architectural plans or building schematics, suggesting that this visit was related to some kind of renovation or reorganization project. MacLeod maintained his professional distance but remained alert as the Queen Consort moved through the castle with obvious familiarity. She had visited Balmoral many times over the years, both as the then Prince Charles's companion and later as his wife. However, today felt different somehow, as if she was seeing the ancient Scottish residence through new eyes, evaluating its potential and possibilities rather than simply enjoying its historic charm. The small group made their way through the public areas of the castle, with Camilla pointing out various features and engaging in intense discussions with her advisors. They examined furniture arrangements, discussed lighting options, and took detailed notes about room dimensions and architectural features. It became clear that significant changes were being contemplated for the beloved royal residence. Mr. Thornton followed at a respectful distance, occasionally offering historical information about particular rooms or artifacts. His extensive knowledge of Balmoral's history and traditions made him an invaluable resource, though MacLeod noticed that the head butler seemed increasingly uncomfortable as the afternoon progressed. There was something about the nature of this visit that was causing concern among the long-serving staff members. As the group continued their tour, they gradually moved closer to the restricted areas of the castle. MacLeod felt his attention sharpen as he realized the direction they were heading. The Queen Consort's party was approaching the sealed wing that contained Queen Elizabeth II's private quarters, the sacred spaces that had been declared off-limits to everyone since her passing. The atmosphere in the castle seemed to grow more tense as afternoon turned toward evening. Other members of the security team had noticed the unusual activity and were quietly positioning themselves throughout the building. There was an unspoken understanding among the guards that something significant was happening, though none of them could have predicted exactly what was about to unfold. Camilla's advisors continued their discussions in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward the restricted wing, with expressions that suggested they were well aware of the sensitive nature of their mission. The architectural plans they carried seemed to include detailed layouts of the entire castle, including areas that had been private to the late Queen during her lifetime. As shadows began to lengthen across the Scottish countryside, MacLeod found himself hoping that the Queen Consort's visit would conclude without incident. However, his years of experience in royal protection had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was telling him that this peaceful afternoon was about to take a dramatic and potentially explosive turn. The moment MacLeod had been dreading arrived just before 6 o'clock in the evening. Queen Consort Camilla and her entourage had completed their tour of the main castle areas and were now standing directly in front of the sealed entrance to Queen Elizabeth II's private quarters. The heavy oak doors that had remained locked and guarded since the late Queen's passing seemed to loom larger than ever in the fading Scottish daylight. Camilla approached the doors with a confidence that suggested she had every right to be there. Despite the clear restrictions that had been placed on these rooms, her private secretary produced a set of keys from her briefcase. Keys that should not have existed outside of the most senior royal household management. The sight of those keys sent a chill down MacLeod's spine as he realized that this visit had been planned with meticulous attention to detail. The sergeant found himself in an impossible position. His duty was to protect the royal family, but it was also to enforce the explicit instructions regarding the sealed quarters. King Charles III himself had ordered that these rooms remain undisturbed, and MacLeod had sworn an oath to uphold royal commands without question. Yet here was the Queen Consort, clearly intending to enter the forbidden areas with apparent authority to do so. Mr. Thornton appeared beside MacLeod, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of significant stress. The head butler's hands trembled slightly as he witnessed what was about to unfold, and he leaned close to the sergeant to whisper urgently about the protocols that were being violated. Both men understood that they were witnessing something that would have profound consequences for everyone involved. As Camilla's secretary inserted the key into the lock, the sound seemed to echo throughout the entire castle. The click of the mechanism engaging felt like a gunshot in the tense silence that had fallen over the assembled group. MacLeod watched in disbelief as the doors that had protected Queen Elizabeth II's most private spaces slowly swung open, revealing the darkened rooms beyond. The Queen Consort stepped across the threshold without hesitation, her advisors following closely behind with their folders and measuring equipment. The violation of the sacred space was so shocking that several of the castle staff who had gathered to witness the scene audibly gasped. These rooms had been the late Queen's sanctuary, the place where she had retreated from the pressures of royal duty to simply be herself. MacLeod felt his professional composure beginning to crack as he watched strangers walking through rooms that still held the Queen's personal belongings. Her books, her photographs, and countless other intimate reminders of her remarkable life. The invasion felt deeply personal, as if the memory of the beloved monarch was being trampled underfoot by people who had no understanding of what these spaces truly meant. The architectural team immediately began taking measurements and photographs, treating the Queen's private study like any other room to be renovated or repurposed. They moved furniture aside without ceremony, examined wallpaper patterns with clinical detachment, and discussed structural modifications as if the room's previous occupant had been merely another tenant rather than one of the most respected monarchs in British history. Camilla herself moved through the rooms with a proprietary air that infuriated MacLeod beyond measure. She examined the Queen's personal desk, opened drawers that should have remained private, and handled precious mementos with casual indifference. The sight of these intimate spaces being violated in such a callous manner pushed the loyal sergeant closer and closer to his breaking point. The lady-in-waiting began making notes about potential changes to the room's layout, suggesting that the Queen's beautiful antique writing desk should be replaced with something more modern and practical. The casual dismissal of furniture that had witnessed decades of royal correspondence and private reflection was more than MacLeod could bear in silence. As the group continued their unauthorized inspection, discussing plans to transform the late Queen's bedroom into a guest suite and her private sitting room into a more formal reception area, MacLeod felt 15 years of loyal service and deep respect for royal tradition crystallizing into a moment of absolute moral clarity. Some boundaries should never be crossed, regardless of who was attempting to cross them. The breaking point came when Camilla's interior designer began discussing the removal of Queen Elizabeth II's personal photograph collection from the sitting room walls. These were not official royal portraits, but intimate family pictures that the Queen had personally chosen and arranged over many years of summers at Balmoral. Each photograph told a story of cherished moments with her children, grandchildren, and beloved husband Prince Philip, creating a visual diary of a life devoted to family and duty. MacLeod watched in horror as the designer casually suggested that these irreplaceable personal mementos should be archived to make way for more contemporary artwork that better reflects the current royal aesthetic. The callous dismissal of the late Queen's most treasured possessions finally pushed the devoted sergeant beyond his limit of professional restraint. "Ma'am, I must protest," MacLeod said, his voice carrying across the room with unmistakable authority. The sudden intervention caused every person in the room to freeze, their conversations stopping mid-sentence as they turned to face the uniformed guard who had dared to speak without being addressed. The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the gentle ticking of the Queen's antique carriage clock on the mantelpiece. Camilla turned slowly to face MacLeod, her expression shifting from surprise to displeasure in a matter of seconds. Her advisors looked equally shocked that a member of the security staff would dare to interrupt their important work, and several of them began whispering urgently among themselves about the unprecedented breach of protocol. "Sergeant MacLeod," she said, her voice carrying a warning tone that would have silenced most people, "I believe you have forgotten your place. You are here to provide security, not to comment on royal family decisions." But MacLeod had served too long and with too much honor to back down now. His loyalty to the crown ran deeper than fear of consequences, and his respect for Queen Elizabeth II's memory burned stronger than any concern for his own career prospects. "Your Majesty," with the greatest respect, His Majesty King Charles III explicitly ordered that these quarters remain sealed and undisturbed. "I have a duty to enforce that command." The tension in the room became almost unbearable as the two strong-willed individuals faced each other across the Queen's private study. Camilla's advisors looked increasingly uncomfortable, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing a confrontation that could have serious repercussions for everyone involved. Mr. Thornton had gone completely pale, understanding better than anyone the explosive nature of what was unfolding. "I am the Queen Consort," Camilla replied, her voice rising slightly, "and I am here on official royal business. These rooms cannot remain frozen in time forever, and decisions must be made about their future use. I have every right to inspect properties that belong to the Crown." MacLeod stood his ground, his 15 years of impeccable service giving him the moral authority to challenge even the Queen Consort when he believed she was wrong. "Ma'am, these are not just Crown properties. These were Her late Majesty's private sanctuary, and they deserve to be treated with the reverence and respect that her memory commands. She lived in these rooms, loved in these rooms, and found peace in these rooms during the most difficult moments of her reign." The personal nature of MacLeod's words seemed to strike a nerve with Camilla, whose own relationship with these spaces and with the late Queen's legacy was complicated by years of public scrutiny and family tensions. Her expression hardened as she realized that this confrontation was about much more than simple protocol violations. "You forget yourself, Sergeant," she said coldly. "The Crown moves forward, and decisions about royal properties are made by the reigning monarch and his consort, not by security personnel who have romantic notions about preserving the past exactly as it was." Dismissive tone and the clear disregard for the emotional significance of the Queen's private spaces pushed MacLeod into territory he had never imagined, entering during his long career in royal service. His voice grew stronger and more determined as he prepared to take a stand that would change everything. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present as one of the most extraordinary moments in modern royal history. Sergeant MacLeod, drawing upon 15 years of unwavering loyalty and deep personal connection to the late Queen, made a decision that would echo through the corridors of power for years to come. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his conviction, "I served Queen Elizabeth II with pride and honor for the better part of my career. I watched her treat every person in this castle, from the highest courtier to the newest kitchen maid, with genuine respect and kindness. She never demanded reverence. She earned it through decades of selfless service to this nation and its people." The room fell completely silent as MacLeod continued, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "These rooms hold the essence of who she truly was when the cameras were off and the crown was set aside. They contain her private thoughts, her personal memories, and the intimate moments that sustained her through 7 decades of public duty. To treat them as mere real estate to be renovated and repurposed is not just wrong, it is a betrayal of everything she represented." Camilla's face flushed with anger at being lectured by a member of the security staff, but MacLeod was far from finished. His voice grew stronger as he drew upon memories of countless interactions with the beloved Queen, moments that had shaped his understanding of what true nobility really meant. "I remember the evening when Her Majesty spent 3 hours in that very chair," he said, pointing to the Queen's favorite reading spot by the window, writing personal thank-you notes to every member of the Balmoral staff after Prince Philip's funeral. She was exhausted, grieving, and overwhelmed, but she took the time to acknowledge each person who had supported her during the most difficult day of her life. The private secretary and other advisors looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were witnessing something far beyond a simple protocol dispute. This was a fundamental clash between 2 completely different visions of what the monarchy should represent and how the memory of Queen Elizabeth II should be honored. "I remember watching her sit at that desk," MacLeod continued, gesturing toward the antique writing table that the interior designer had so casually dismissed, composing her Christmas broadcasts by hand, agonizing over every word, because she understood that millions of people around the world would draw comfort and inspiration from her message. That desk witnessed the creation of some of the most important communications in modern royal history. Camilla attempted to interrupt, but MacLeod's passion was now unstoppable. Years of respectful silence were pouring out in a torrent of heartfelt testimony about the Queen he had served and admired beyond measure. "And I remember the last time I saw her in this room," he said, his voice becoming quieter but somehow more powerful. "Just 3 days before she passed away, she was sitting in that chair, looking out at the Scottish countryside she loved so much, and she told me that Balmoral was the only place where she could truly be herself. She said these rooms held her heart, and she hoped they would remain peaceful long after she was gone. The emotional weight of MacLeod's words seemed to fill the entire room, and several of the staff members who had gathered in the doorway were visibly moved by his passionate defense of their beloved former mistress. Even some of Camilla's own advisors appeared touched by the sergeant's obvious devotion and the intimate glimpse he was providing into the late queen's private world. But Camilla herself was not moved. If anything, she seemed more determined than ever to assert her authority and continue with her plans. Her next words would escalate the confrontation beyond anything anyone present could have imagined possible. The queen consort's response to MacLeod's passionate defense was swift and cutting. Her voice carried a coldness that seemed to freeze the air in the queen's former sanctuary, as she delivered words that would haunt everyone present for years to come. Sergeant MacLeod, your sentimental attachment to the past is touching, but ultimately irrelevant, she said with devastating precision. Queen Elizabeth is dead. Her time is over, and the monarchy must evolve to meet the needs of a new era. These rooms will serve the crown, far better as functional spaces rather than as some kind of morbid shrine to a woman who can no longer benefit from your misplaced devotion. The brutal dismissal of the late queen's legacy and the callous reference to her death sent shockwaves through everyone present. Mr. Thornton actually staggered backward as if he had been physically struck, while several of the younger staff members gasped audibly at the queen consort's harsh words. But it was MacLeod's reaction that truly electrified the room. 15 years of professional restraint evaporated in an instant as he processed the devastating insult to the memory of the monarch he had served with such dedication and love. His face darkened with an anger that was all the more powerful for being completely justified. "How dare you," he said, his voice now carrying an authority that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient castle. "How dare you stand in her private sanctuary and speak of Queen Elizabeth II with such callous disrespect? She dedicated her entire life to this nation and its people, sacrificing her personal happiness time and again for the good of the crown. And you dismiss her as irrelevant? You call devotion to her memory misplaced?" The confrontation had now moved far beyond questions of protocol or authority. This was a battle for the very soul of what the British monarchy should represent, fought in the most intimate setting imaginable, the private rooms where Queen Elizabeth II had found peace and solace during her remarkable reign. "You may hold the title of Queen Consort," MacLeod continued, his voice rising with righteous indignation, "but you will never possess 1/10 of the grace, dignity, or genuine nobility that Queen Elizabeth II demonstrated every single day of her 70-year reign. She earned the love and respect of millions through her actions, her sacrifice, and her unwavering commitment to duty. You demand respect based solely on a title you married into." The personal nature of the attack left Camilla momentarily speechless, her face flushing red with a combination of anger and embarrassment. Her advisors looked absolutely horrified as they realized they were witnessing a complete breakdown of the careful protocols that governed interactions between royalty and staff. "You forget that Queen Elizabeth II chose to spend her final days in these very rooms," MacLeod pressed on, pointing to the furniture and personal belongings that surrounded them. "She could have died anywhere, in London, Windsor, or any of the grand palaces at her disposal. But she chose Balmoral, and specifically these private quarters because this was where her heart truly belonged. To violate that sacred choice shows a level of disrespect that is simply unforgivable." The sergeant's words carried such conviction and moral authority that even Camilla seemed momentarily uncertain how to respond. The staff members gathered in the doorway were clearly inspired by his courage in defending their beloved former mistress, while her own advisors appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the direction the confrontation was taking. But MacLeod was not finished. Drawing upon every memory of the Queen's kindness, wisdom, and devotion to duty, he prepared to deliver words that would end his career, but defend her honor in a way that would be remembered long after he was gone from royal service. The final moments of the confrontation unfolded with a dramatic intensity that would be whispered about in royal circles for generations to come. Sergeant MacLeod, having crossed every line of protocol and propriety in his defense of Queen Elizabeth II's memory, prepared to deliver his ultimate statement of loyalty and principle. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice now carrying the calm certainty of a man who had chosen honor over career security, "I have served the crown faithfully for 15 years, and I have never once questioned a royal command or challenged royal authority. But I will not stand silently by while the memory of the finest monarch this nation has ever known is trampled underfoot by someone who clearly lacks any understanding of what true service and sacrifice actually mean. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down before the Queen Consort. Every person present understood that MacLeod had just committed an act of professional suicide. But his courage in defending the late Queen's legacy was so inspiring that several of the staff members began to quietly applaud. Despite the enormous personal risk such support entailed, Camilla's fury was now beyond containment. Her carefully maintained royal composure cracked completely as she faced this unprecedented challenge to her authority from someone she considered far beneath her station. "You are finished, Sergeant MacLeod," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "I will ensure that you never work in royal service again, and that your reputation is destroyed so thoroughly that no respectable household in Britain will ever employ you." But MacLeod simply smiled, an expression of such serene confidence that it seemed to infuriate Camilla even further. "Your Majesty, my reputation was built on 15 years of loyal service to Queen Elizabeth II. If defending her memory from disrespect and dishonor destroys that reputation in your eyes, then I consider it a small price to pay for maintaining my integrity and honor." The moral authority in MacLeod's words was so powerful that even some of Camilla's own advisors seemed moved by his principled stand. The interior designer who had so casually dismissed the Queen's photograph collection was now looking distinctly uncomfortable, while the private secretary appeared to be reconsidering the wisdom of the entire unauthorized expedition. As news of the confrontation began to spread throughout the castle, more staff members gathered to witness the extraordinary scene. Housekeepers, gardeners, cooks, and maintenance workers, all of whom had loved and respected Queen Elizabeth II, watched with admiration as MacLeod continued to defend her memory against what they saw as an unforgivable violation of sacred space. The standoff finally ended when Mr. Thornton, summoning courage from MacLeod's example, stepped forward to address the Queen Consort directly. "Your Majesty," the elderly head butler said with quiet dignity, "I believe His Majesty King Charles III should be informed immediately about this situation. These quarters were sealed by his direct command, and any changes to that arrangement should surely require his explicit approval." The mention of the King's involvement seemed to give Camilla pause for the first time since the confrontation began. The realization that her unauthorized entry into the restricted quarters would have to be explained to her husband, and potentially to the broader royal family, and introduce complications she had apparently not fully considered. Within hours, the story of Sergeant MacLeod's courageous stand had spread throughout the royal household network, inspiring loyalty and admiration among staff members who had served Queen Elizabeth II with similar devotion. His willingness to sacrifice his career to defend her memory became a powerful symbol of the genuine love and respect the late Queen had earned through decades of dedicated service. Though MacLeod's royal career ended that day, his legacy as the guard who refused to let Queen Elizabeth II's memory be dishonored ensured that he would be remembered with honor and respect long after the immediate controversy had faded. His principled stand reminded everyone present that true nobility comes not from titles or position, but from the courage to defend what is right, regardless of the personal cost.